feel like I'm in class or
something. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So I am very excited for our next episode of Finances with Friends to welcome Hilary to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me today.
Hilary is a registered psychotherapist. You got your, check my notes here, your Master of Arts in Counselling Psychology.
Correct.
You've been in private practice for over 4 years, and you're currently working at Calming Tree Counselling and Psychology, is that right? Psychotherapy. Sorry. Yep, Calming Tree Counselling and Psychotherapy in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Yes.
And you recently became the team lead for the social media and marketing there as well. So that kind of got us talking about the potential of doing this. So very grateful to have you on here and super excited to chat about all things therapy. And I think we have a great podcast coming up that relates to money as well.
Yes.
So I think we've really found the sweet spot here, which I appreciate all the work you did preparing for this as well.
You're welcome.
You said that you had a breathing exercise for me.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to walk you through it. I'm not going to do it with you.
Excuse me.
I'll model it for you.
We both need to zen here, you know? Is it like a...
It's like a physical one.
Hold for 4?
Kind of. It's like a vagal. We call it a 5-point vagal exercise, calming exercise. So
anybody that knows me knows I'm an extremely calm person.
You had calm energy when you walked in here today, so not really.
Did you just wink at the camera?
No.
There? Like, no, I didn't.
No. Okay. You're gonna take a deep breath first.
Woosah.
Yeah. Take a breath, and then you're gonna put your hands on your earlobes, and you're just gonna massage the earlobes. This
is from Bad Boys 2. You ever seen this?
No.
Remember your pressure points, Kate.
You're gonna massage them, and then you're gonna move your hands over your eyes, and you're gonna take a few deep breaths. And then when you're done, you're gonna move them over your hands over your heart like this.
Do you know the heart's more in the middle?
Yeah.
On the left?
Wherever your heart is. There's no need to be technical, but
well, the heart's
take another couple deep breaths. And then you move your hands to your face, kind of like you're cupping a child's face. It's like a gesture of care.
Like a way a grandmother would
go,
Sonny boy.
And then you take more deep breaths.
She's going to have a field day with these.
And then you place them on your tummy and do the same thing. Feel your diaphragm expand and compress. And then you're done. You should feel calm. You're not supposed to laugh as much through it, but you get the idea.
So, psychotherapy.
Yes.
We've already made an agreement. There'll be no psychoanalyzing me during this podcast, okay? So
I'll try my best.
That's the deal. Talk to me a little bit about what psychotherapy is.
Yes. So psychotherapy is kind of traditionally more known as talk therapy, but it's also where I'm working with clients and using a lot of different therapeutic modalities and approaches. There's lots of technical terms involved in that, which I won't get too bogged down in. But primarily, I work with adult clients who present with a variety of issues. So it could be things like anxiety, depression, life stressors, difficult life transitions, low self-worth, relationship issues, kind of everything under that umbrella.
Okay. There can't be much people that fall in that bracket, can there?
Oh, you'd be surprised. Everybody has mental health. Everybody can benefit from going to therapy.
Yes, I agree. Yes. Sarcasm there, which is a common theme of these podcasts.
Yes, I'm gathering that.
There you go, yes. So we have a great podcast lined up here, and we wanted to start with the individual side of things and talking about anxiety and financial anxiety. So maybe we'll start with anxiety first.
Yeah, so anxiety is something that everyone experiences. It's a natural human emotion that we all have, similar to feeling, sad or happy or overjoyed, whatever feeling word you want to put in there. But what's important to know about anxiety as well is it's what we call a fear-based response that happens on both a physiological level in our body and our nervous system, but also on a mental kind of emotional level in our brain as well. So there's a really helpful analogy or kind of reference point that we call like the caveman analogy, which is if you think back to like cavemen era, they were hunter-gatherers, like quite literally every day was a fight to survive. In either like finding food or fighting off threats, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
is that how you
that's
fight
how
off the threats?
Yeah.
That's how you do it?
Don't approach. But yeah, so they, for example, they have a anxiety fear-based response system in them, right? This is a very innate, inherent trait that we all kind of have. And so if they approach like a saber-toothed tiger, for example, their fight or flight system is going to activate, right? Because they literally need to survive, right? They either need to fight it off or run away from it and get to safety. And so that kind of demonstrates the function of anxiety. It's to get us to a place of safety, and it helps to protect us and keep us safe. Unfortunately, what's happened is this system, this anxiety system, or the fight or flight response hasn't necessarily evolved, but society has. And so the stressors and the stimuli that we might encounter have gotten a lot more complicated and not necessarily as straightforward. And so sometimes our brain isn't always as good at detecting the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. And so we often can find ourselves experiencing anxiety on a physiological level, but also a mental level in response to something that maybe isn't a threat, right? So of course, if there was a tiger sitting right next to you, you'd be scared. And
yes. And sometimes people like, do you feel as a professional that the word anxiety gets thrown around too much, or does it still have a negative connotation to it? What are your feelings on that, knowing that a lot of times people get anxious about stuff that is not a tiger in front of them?
Yeah, I think actually the word is not used enough. I think we're actually seeing the opposite because people associate like, well, if I'm saying I'm anxious, then like, does that mean I have generalized anxiety disorder, or do I need medication? And no, that's not the case. Like everybody has anxiety. You just might not call it anxiety, right? Some people might call it, I'm nervous, I'm stressed.
We said we weren't going to talk about me.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I'm saying in general.
You cut that.
No, don't cut it. Saying I'm nervous or I'm stressed or I'm overwhelmed. And that is all the same response happening like in your nervous system. And so I think it actually needs to be talked about more because it is a very like natural, normal feeling that we all have in response to things that can feel scary or overwhelming or like a threat to us. And going back to this idea, your brain doesn't always know the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. So when it sees like a perceived threat, that's where, our anxious part can kind of take over and start telling us these very big, grandiose stories about like really terrible, awful things that are going to happen. And then your brain kind of goes into survival mode, right? Of like, well, if this happens, like, how would we respond? What would we do? And then that's where you kind of get that like inner monologue that just like doesn't stop. That's your anxious part telling you what the threat is or what it might be and how you can prepare for that.
And a lot of clients I see, and their financial anxiety comes from, whys and those financial whys in the road that you have, whether you're approaching retirement, changing careers, starting a family, buying a house, wondering if you're saving enough, wondering if you're doing enough, and oftentimes maybe not even about something in particular, but just about concerned, are they doing the right things?
Yeah.
And so we see financial anxiety rear its ugly head a lot. And like you said, I mean, most people have it, some more than others, but and sometimes it shows up in different ways.
Yeah, there's lots of ways that it can show up, primarily in like thought patterns, right? So I like to kind of refer to these as like thinking traps. Another term to refer to them is as stuck points. So they're like thoughts that you get really stuck in, right? So if you think of like a bear trap, when you step in it, it like clamps onto you and really gets a hold of you. And this is where the thoughts, right, kind of start spiraling and then start influencing behavior or choices, right? Whether that be a lack of decision or being unsure of like what direction to go, especially with money. And so, yeah, we see anxiety often as a desire for control as well. Oftentimes when people feel anxious, it's you feel out of control, and when there's no control, it gives the illusion that we are unsafe, and then that becomes the threat. And for money, that might look like, I don't have enough saved. If I don't make this decision, I'm being financially irresponsible, or if I do this, like what's going to happen 5 years down the road, right? And so all of those thoughts or stories being told to you by your anxious part are versions of what we call those thinking traps. So catastrophizing, right? Thinking about worst case scenario and then over exaggerating the likelihood that that thing is actually going to happen and come true. All or nothing thinking, right? Which is kind of the other way that can be referred to as black and white thinking. So it's either this or this. There's no gray area in between. Or what we might call if-then statements, right? So it kind of sounds like, if I don't do this, then this bad thing is going to happen. And so all of those are coming from a place of fear, right? And it's a fear-based decision that's being made rather than a decision that is being made in like logic, reason, or being able to kind of access those more cognitive parts of our brain.
So what do you say to people that you're talking to that might be, I can't even say the word,
Catastrophizing. It's a tongue twister, yeah.
I had a tongue twister there, yeah. I don't like to catastrophize, so I wouldn't even say that word either.
You don't even know how to do it.
I don't know how to do it. So, what do you say to people that you're talking to that are doing that?
Yeah, I think when people are presenting with something like catastrophizing, we really want to be intentional about slowing them down. And again, really reminding them that like thoughts are not facts, they're just thoughts, right? These again are just like stories that our brain is telling us. And so taking a breath, pause, and then something we might look at doing is kind of looking at evidence for versus evidence against, right? So, if the thought is, if I do this, then I'm going to go broke, right? We're going to look at that thought and we're going to say, okay, what evidence do you have that that's actually going to happen, right? Like, what do you have to support that? There might be one thing, maybe, like if you've experienced financial stressor in the past, sure, that's one piece of evidence. But 9 times out of 10, we see that there's actually much more evidence that doesn't support that thought, right? That says, this is actually not that likely to come true, right? And that's exactly what catastrophizing does, is we tend to over exaggerate the likelihood of this terrible, awful thing coming true, and we get very caught up in that. And so sometimes it's just slowing down enough to realize like, hey, there's another, alternative here. And that kind of leads me into talking about, your brain is wired to think in the negative. It's just like, it's a survival instinct. It's just inherently what we do. And so that's why it is so easy to get caught up in those kind of negative thought patterns, whether it's from anxiety or maybe just feeling down overall in your mood. And we have to be really intentional about thinking about the positive, right? So, thinking about what would this look like if this was all okay. And so there's a saying I really like to share with clients, and it's possible is different than likely, really meaning like, yeah, anything's possible. Terrible things are possible, but good things are also really possible. And just because there's a possibility of something doesn't mean it's likely to happen or likely to come true. And I think this is something you can apply a lot with finances of, yes, like worst case scenario is possible, but is it likely, right? What's the probability of that actually happening? And so it's really important and helpful to like slow down and think about that like big picture.
And I think, when both of our professions, and certainly not equating them, but for what you do is more important, but the idea that speaking to somebody to be able to, a professional person, to show you those possibilities and show you the other potential scenarios that could be. And, in my experience, I've seen bad, I've seen worse, I've seen good, I've seen great, and so it's oftentimes like, hey, this is not the end of the world, whereas somebody might think it is, and go, if we do X, Y, and Z, this elephant will be out of the room, or the monkey will be off your back in a year or 2 years or whatever that is. We could build a plan to get out of that, and I think that's great point that you made about just not always thinking of the worst possible scenario. And sometimes that's chatting with somebody to go, hey, have you thought about this being an alternative scenario there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, when we're talking about something like anxiety, the antidote to that is often kind of thinking about how can you take action with this in some way to help show your nervous system like, hey, this isn't actually something we need to be afraid of with this big response. And so like meeting with a financial planner such as yourself can be very helpful, because you can make a plan. Those anxious parts can get reassurance about like, oh, this isn't as scary as we thought. There's actually things we can do here, right? And there is some like action to be taken. When we avoid, having those conversations or making a plan, or just avoid addressing or confronting our anxiety in general, we kind of get stuck in what we call this cycle of avoidance, which is, if you think of a cycle, it's a circle, right? That you just kind of keep going round and round. And, stage one of that is you encounter the stressor or the thing that is creating anxiety for you. Stage two is you start to feel all that physical discomfort, but also emotional discomfort that comes with anxiety. So, again, heart rate increases, blood flow increases, pupils dilate, you might feel shaky, you might feel hard to breathe, right? Kind of more panicky. And so when we feel that level of discomfort physically and emotionally, your brain kind of starts going, this is highly uncomfortable. I got to get out of this. Like, I can't tolerate this. And the quickest way to often do that is to leave, right? Leave the person, place, or thing that is making you feel anxious and uncomfortable. And so when you do that, you do feel better, right? It's just, what happens, there's a moment of relief. But we really want to emphasize it is a short-term experience of relief. And unfortunately, it reinforces anxiety, right? So what we often say is like, yes, you're getting short-term relief, but you're actually contributing to the long-term growth of your anxiety.
That elephant's still growing.
Yeah, you haven't. Yeah, you're just like, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, right? Like you haven't actually addressed the wound. You're just like, trying to not deal with it. And so it just grows, right? And so the longer you avoid something, the more scary it actually becomes to you, and the bigger your fear gets. And then we feel almost paralyzed, right? Like we don't know what to do. We don't know how to take action. We feel indecisive about it. And that is the effect that anxiety can very much have on us, is it leads to us feeling very stuck, right? And then that's where you get stuck in that cycle. And so what we're also doing with avoiding is we kind of create this pathway in our brain that basically tells us like, you don't have the tools to handle this, like you don't have the distress tolerance, you can't do this. And so we kind of psych ourselves out in that way, or kind of get in our own way. And so the antidote to that is like challenging yourself, right, to do the hard thing. And again, when we often confront that thing, it's usually not as bad as we think, right? And the more you do that, the more your system sees that and experiences that and takes inventory of positive experiences, right, where the worst case scenario didn't come true. And it builds up our confidence, it builds up our distress tolerance, so that we get better at exposing ourselves to those things that feel scary or anxiety provoking.
And it's easier to deal with, somebody that might have debt sooner rather than later. You know, if you keep avoiding that meeting and indecision is the worst decision that you can make. And so we keep avoiding that, it's more difficult because compound interest is working against you. And also the flip side of it is if you start saving early, and then that can really snowball in the proper way as well, compounding, working to your advantage. So it's, by not avoiding those maybe uncomfortable or difficult conversations and meeting them head on can, I think really, I've seen it happen a lot where that stress goes away after some time. So I think that's a very good point, cycle of avoidance.
Absolutely.
Right. So along those lines, what are some quick strategies and tips that you have for dealing with anxiety?
One of the easiest ones is breathe. Remember to breathe. Anxiety often can really get a hold of us, and before you know it, you can't remember the last time you took a good deep breath. So just really paying attention to pressing pause, slowing down. Something else you can do is kind of focusing on what is within your circle of control. So maybe you make a list, right, of all the things that are swirling around your head, all the anxious thoughts, the things you're afraid of. Write them all down, and then you go through that list and you basically strike a line through anything that you can't actually do something about. And after you've done that, ideally on the list, what you're left with is things you can do something about, right? So it's actually something that is within your control. Booking a meeting with CJ for financial planning, like what's a step you can actually take, and sometimes that can just provide a little bit of soothing and reassurance for that anxious part. And referencing something I said earlier, asking yourself like what would happen if it all worked out, right? If you find yourself getting really caught up in the negative, again, press pause, take a deep breath.
Be open to the potential that it might work out and things could be good.
Absolutely. And again, you can just say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What would happen if this all worked out? What would that look like, right? And being very intentional about just let your brain go to the place of like if it was positive or okay or just neutral, right?
So we've talked about financial anxiety and dealing with, the individual side of things. A lot of times I'm meeting with couples. And when you choose to do life with somebody, money is a big part of that conversation. And I see that a lot of times in meetings there and the dynamics of the relationships and all that. So when you're talking with people, what are some of the things that you see out there and some of the tips that you have for people for dealing with money in relationships?
Yeah, I would say money in relationships and like talking about finances is probably one of the most common conflicts we kind of see present in relationships.
I would agree.
Yeah, money makes the world go round, so of course it shows up in relationships as well. And I think what we see being one of the biggest contributing factors is just different backgrounds of like the way people grew up, the way people were raised with like values and moral systems around money, or different socioeconomic backgrounds. So for example, right, if you had someone who grew up with very little money and grew up like kind of watching their parents having to navigate that and be really intentional with saving and having to forgo certain things, right? They might be someone as an adult that is maybe more frugal, right, and much more like rigid in their belief system with money and where they spend it. And if that person then gets into a relationship with someone who, let's say, was from like a higher upper class, in socioeconomic status, and they had lots of money and lived a more privileged life, you can see how kind of those two lifestyles and belief systems would kind of butt heads, right? And so sometimes that's where the conflict kind of rise, is they have different belief systems, and the challenge is kind of finding a middle ground and a compromise in what can we agree to that's going to help both of us feel okay with this and feel heard with it.
So a lot of times in client conversations, it kind of comes through in those conversations that it might not be the money that's the problem, even though that's, the big thing, and obviously the decision that has to be made more times than not, but more so it's, one person's feelings, and maybe they're not feeling seen or heard in that conversation with their partner. And I think that's why I always try to recommend, if you're unsure about what to do, or if you're not coming to the same conclusion or aligned, come in for an appointment, let's talk, because it's not mediate the conversation, but it's like give you the pros and cons of each direction so that you can make an informed decision together.
Yeah.
So, identifying sometimes that it's not maybe your partner is doing that on purpose to treat you like that or anything like that. Sometimes it's, about listening and hearing what your partner's going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of speaks to this phrase we have of like behavior meets a need, right? So sometimes in conversations about money, the way your partner is maybe presenting or behaving is maybe not actually just about the money, right? You bought an $8 Starbucks coffee and they're upset. That's probably not actually the thing they're upset about. It touches on a deeper issue, right? So kind of, again, slowing down enough to recognize like, where is this actually coming from for them? What are they feeling? What need are they trying to have met in this moment? How can you help with that? And as you said, like making sure both sides are being heard, right? So we want to listen as much as we talk in those situations, and also be able to kind of look at big picture, right? Like what are we kind of dealing with?
So those are the types of questions that you ask Andrew when you guys are arguing about money. You say, it feels like you need to be heard on this, or is that...
No, it's usually not that smooth. I'm a therapist, but also human, so you can gather how those go.
There you go, yes. Well, that's good to know that you're just like everyone else in that respect. And on that note, talking about the power dynamics within the relationship. So we have that history, and the parents that are involved there, and that the history, the way you were brought up, but also the power dynamic back and forth, and how in a relationship you often find roles where one person may manage the household bills and expenses and savings and investments, may lead that, but the importance of being aligned and together on financial wise.
Yeah, and I would say power dynamics are definitely something else that can come through in relationships when we're talking about money and finances. And, this obviously exists on a spectrum, right? Like there is an area where it can be extremely abusive behavior, but we're more so talking about, sometimes how the power dynamic can arise, sometimes unintentionally, right? Potentially if one partner makes more than the other. And naturally, we kind of also have this phenomenon where one person usually handles more of the finances in the relationship. We just kind of find our roles
Which
with
isn't
that.
often, it's not always the person that is the, better person at managing money.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just kind of thrown into that role because of the dynamics of the relationship or whatnot. So.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not necessarily a rhyme or reason, but I think the thing we want to get at is just, never using money as a way to like leverage your partner or like control them in any way, right? We really want to emphasize like transparency, honesty, making sure you're on the same kind of playing field and you both have like the full financial picture of what's going on, because that's where it can be like a slippery slope in money feeling like a way to control your partner, again, either intentionally or unintentionally. But yeah, we just want to kind of avoid that dynamic if we can. Again, talking to a financial planner can be helpful with that, to make sure that you both understand what's going on and both have awareness about where your money is going.
Sometimes it's easier to listen to that third-party person as opposed to your partner,
Absolutely.
where there's a bit more history with that. There.
Yeah, and we see that in therapy as well, where like it's just helpful to have like a third-party, non-biased person, right, that has like an objective perspective and can kind of reflect things back to you in a way that is helpful. Right?
In meetings, talking with couples, I think it's often important to acknowledge your partner and that the background that they may have, or they might not be ready to make that decision, even though you think it's the smartest decision in the world, and it's the path forward. I think acknowledging that and making sure that they're comfortable with that helps you stay on the same page, which sets you up for long-term success, as opposed to if they're unsure about it and you make a decision and then that decision backfires, it's going to potentially lead to some butting heads, and some I told you so's potentially. So making sure that you're on the same page and that you're both committed to making that investment or that purchase or that whatever that is, can save you some I told you so's and nonsense down the road and help make it build that effective relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. And I think that just speaks to like tips in general about like talking about money, right? Is like be open, be honest, be transparent, be patient with each other.
Yes.
The other thing I would say too is like talk about money early on. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have in a relationship, but you don't want to get, 5 years into a relationship, you've bought a house together, and then find out you have a completely different value system about money that is going to be like a breeding ground of like frustration and resentment,
to say the least.
So problematic in lots of ways, but like having these conversations early on, similar to talking about like kids or marriage. Do you want kids? Do you want to get married? Right? These are like big life things that we can talk about, and money is definitely one of them. And it's uncomfortable at first, but the more you talk about it, the more it just becomes like a natural kind of thing that you do, right? And for some couples, that looks like having a weekly check-in, right, about where our finances at, or maybe it's monthly, whatever works for you. But as you said, just making sure you're both on the same page, being patient with each other, giving, if a partner is not well versed in finances, giving them time to learn it and understand it in their own own way.
And don't avoid it. Like, going back to what we talked about, like it's don't avoid it. You know, have those conversations, be open and transparent, and I think that sets you up for success.
Absolutely.
So we talked about the individual,
yes,
and how individuals experience financial anxiety, and then we talked about and then we talked about the power dynamics between couples and money and relationships. So kind of, you know, the individual side of it, and then how to interact with your partner, maybe in better ways or in the best way. And now to zoom out even further, looking at a comparison to others and keeping up with the Joneses, which is a century-old tale, and is even worse nowadays with social media.
Yes.
So I'm sure, as I see a lot of younger clients specifically coming into my office and feeling like they're not as further ahead as they would like to be, not as far ahead as their parents were at that point, and maybe not as far ahead as their friends are. So just a lot of that, a lot of those feelings, as you would say. And so I'm sure you're seeing the same.
Yeah, absolutely we are.
A lot of feelings.
Yeah, a lot of feelings. Yeah, that's something you talk about in therapy.
Did you say something we could talk about in therapy?
No, I just said we in general.
Okay, sorry. All right, sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, still the latter applies.
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of that. I think in all ages, all generations, I think it's something that's always existed, but we are living in an era where social media is at our fingertips, and so we have a lot more material to expose ourselves to, where we are making those comparisons, you know, of ourselves to other people, and we see this a lot in young people because there's such a, you know, desire to share what's going on in your life and, you know, put it out there for the world to see, which can be really great, but it also can be kind of harmful, and that's the harmful part comes from the comparison. Not
to weave here, but it's almost like fulfilling in this is a weave, but it's almost fulfilling in one of the ways that you said earlier, where it's filling a hollow bucket.
Yeah, it fills a bit of a hole.
But it is fulfilling, but it's hollow because it's.
Yeah, it gets at more of like this external validation, which we all benefit from. We all seek it out, right? And that is why social media works, is because you get a like, you get a comment, it feels good. And so that's why we post. That's why we keep going back to it, right? It also could just be as simple as, you know, you see a funny video and it gives you a dopamine hit. So we're all very chronically online, I would say.
Yeah.
But when you start scrolling and looking at, you know, all the things other people are doing, right? We can sometimes get stuck in this trap of, I'm not doing enough, I'm failing in some way, what's wrong with me, you know, everyone else is further along than me, and so in that process we are kind of minimizing and dismissing all the things you have done, all the things you could be proud of but just aren't acknowledging for yourself, and so we get very stuck in this trap of just, you know, dismissing anything we've done that's positive and saying, well, this person did more, so it's not good enough. I need to try harder, be better, do more. Or
the opposite. I'm never going to be able to do that, so I'm just going to give up. And I feel like I see that out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of gets us stuck in also like this fear of further failure, if you will, because we're just afraid of like trying to do something and potentially not getting it right, or not, you know, getting all the way to the top the first go around. And the reality is you have to fail a few times before you become successful at something. And yeah, I would say another place that comparison often comes from is through generations. So like, as you said, parents, right, will often say, you know, when I was your age, I had, you know, 5 kids, I had 2 homes, and, you know, this big fancy car, and, you know, what have you done by the age of 25, right? And I think for them, they maybe feel that that's motivating, but in ways it's not. It actually is just highlighting maybe all the things you haven't done yet by age 25, and so we just don't want to set our kids up for failure in that way, and recognizing like it's a very different time, very different economy, you know.
Yeah, I see that a lot with parents saying like, don't rent, or don't lease a car, or don't do this or don't do that, and I feel like it's there's ways that parents were successful, and then that could be through real estate, through investing, through owning a business, through, you know, a myriad of different things, but at the end of the day, it's a different time. Their children are different people.
Yeah.
And it's not often going to be the same way. And those tips and advice and that wisdom and experience is great. But to say that's the only way to do it, I think is unfair to the kids sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we can recognize it comes from a good place, but maybe it doesn't always land that way. And yeah, when we're talking about this idea of comparison in general, there's a quote that I love to share with clients, and it's "Comparison is the thief of joy" by Teddy Roosevelt.
Another good one.
Yeah.
Another good one.
And it really highlights the whole idea of comparison, right? Of like, in the process of comparing yourself to other people, all we're really doing is stealing our own joy, stealing our own accomplishments. And so we just want to be really intentional about, noticing when we're getting stuck in that, pressing pause, and being able to maybe acknowledge, hey, like, what have I done? Like, what can I be proud of? Because your version of success might look different than someone else's, and that's okay. And I would also say it's very important to give yourself compassion and, offer that to yourself instead of criticizing and judging and shaming yourself.
Yeah, I had an interesting personal anecdote to add in there about my oldest daughter, Charlotte. We were driving home from hockey, and it was her first time playing center and on full ice, and she was frustrated and upset. And so we were just chatting about how she was feeling, and she said she was mad at herself because she let the team down and she played a bad game. And so trying to acknowledge and hear, though, be empathetic to those feelings that she was feeling, which was strong, because which her feelings were strong. I brought up to her, because she's kind of a mother hen on the team, and so I brought up to her, what if one of the other girls were saying the same thing to you, that they were mad at themselves, they let the team down, etc. What would you say to that other girl? And because she is a mother hen and she's very compassionate and empathetic, she said all the right things that you would want to say, like, hey, you played a great game, it was your first time playing center, it's not worth beating yourself up over, and you'll be better next game. And she kind of said all those right things. And I think it was kind of a light bulb moment for her, because I said, well, if you're going to talk to your friend like that, don't you deserve to talk to yourself like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that story. And
shout out me.
Yeah, shout out to you. Go Dad. Yeah, it's a great example of, we are very good at giving other people compassion and being kind to others. It's a lesson that's drilled into us from a very young age. We're taught the golden rule in school and all these things, which are great, but we often don't know how to be compassionate towards ourselves, right? And this is something I see with clients is, I say the word self-compassion, and it's like, well, how do I do that? What does that look like? And so what your daughter did is actually an example of what we call the compassionate other, which is a strategy we teach with self-compassion, which is, imagining, right, if someone you loved and cared about came to you and said, hey, I'm struggling with all of this is what I'm feeling, thinking about what you would say to them, right? My guess is you wouldn't say to them, like, you suck, get it together, like, what are you doing, right? You would probably give them a very, like, kind, caring, compassionate message. And so once you have that message, can you kind of hold on to it and then reflect it back to yourself? Because you are also deserving of that compassion and kindness that we so readily give to other people.
Yeah, and I see that with her, and we were talking more in detail about, just giving yourself grace, and what does grace mean, but it just giving yourself that grace and being self-compassionate.
Cut yourself some slack.
Easy. Well, not easy, but
easier said than done. But
we've got a lot of great tips so far, and we've talked a lot about how to deal with money, and so I don't want this to be as much about money, this section, but more of a fun section, hopefully. And at the end, we got some tips and ways to deal with anxiety, ways to more effectively chat with your partner about finances, and also giving yourself some grace and not beating yourself up so much, comparing yourself to others. And so for our last topic here, to talk about finding the joy. So how do we find the joy in life in a world where a lot of negativity out there, and your phone has these headlines that are pounded to it all the time about negativity.
Yeah.
So how can we find the joy in life?
Yeah, I think step one is acknowledging, like, yes, at all times, we can all get a little bit down, right? We might feel depressed. We might feel a lack of motivation, a loss of pleasure and joy in things that we used to like doing, especially this time of year. Seasonal affective disorder is a very real thing that almost everyone experiences. The weather is cold, the days are shorter, there's less sunlight, and we just kind of want to hibernate at home, right? So that can contribute to kind of this freeze state that we can go into. And so this is why it's so important to kind of find things to look forward to, right? Find the joy, as you said. And yeah, just looking for really small things, like literally anything that makes you happy. And I didn't coin this term, but it's this idea of like looking for the glimmers, right? So like these little, pockets of joy throughout your day that make you feel good, give you the warm and fuzzies, make you laugh, right? And that could be anything, but the idea is focusing on small things, right, that you can pick out of anywhere.
Yep. And Vivian's going to put
glimmers. Love it.
So I'm a big Tony Robbins fan, and he talks a lot about gratitude in his events and that. So I think like the glimmers that you're talking about there are being able to find the gratitude in your days and in your life, to be able to have gratitude for the good things, the good glimmers that you have in your life there.
Yeah, absolutely. And gratitude work is definitely something that translates well with that idea of looking for those glimmers. And gratitude is very similar, right? Of like just looking for things every day and making it a daily practice of things that you are grateful for or things that you appreciate. And it doesn't have to be a big, grandiose thing. It could be, waking up in the morning and saying, I'm grateful that my feet hit the floor this morning. I'm grateful that I can take a big, deep breath. I'm grateful I can, go for a walk today in the sunshine, right? And so just focusing on these things that, like everyday things we often take advantage of and we don't slow down enough to notice because we just get caught up in the urgency of things, right? In the busyness of life.
And I think you said a good, like when you were giving the examples of gratitude, I think that's something that I've noticed is that, when you wake up and you're practicing gratitude, your mindset shifts from, I have to go to work, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do that, to I get to do this, I get to do that. And I think that's pretty powerful mindset shift there. By practicing gratitude earlier in the day and waking up with that graciousness.
Yeah, gratitude,
right?
Graciousness. Yeah, giving yourself grace, right? And I think that is such a powerful way to reframe it, right? Of like, this is a privilege that you get to do this and that we're here and we get to live this life. And yes, obviously life gets hard at times. It's not always sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, but there are still lots of good moments, right? And so in order to experience the good, we do have to kind of learn to experience the bad as well. And there's a saying I often share with clients around, I have a lot of these sayings, evidently.
Yes, you do, yes.
But
which so far you've been on them. I mean, they're great.
The pain of presence versus the pain of absence. And very much speaking to this idea, to be present is painful, right? Like you are going to have to experience tough things. Everyone does that. It's a shared human experience in life, but there's also going to be so many joyful, like loving, caring moments you get to experience with yourself and people in your life. And so you have to have both, right? You can't have one without the other. The opposite is pain of absence, right? Which is how it sounds of like there's pain in being absent because you're being absent in an effort to avoid the discomfort and the bad, but in doing that you also are missing out on the good, right? So you're causing yourself to miss out on these things that you might be able to express gratitude or appreciation towards. And so for me, I'd much rather be in the pain of being present versus the pain of being absent.
Yeah, and I think it's the like even sometimes it's easier to be absent, and harder to be present, as you said. And I feel that one, but when you're present, you do get that fulfillment, and you do usually get that gratitude of being like, when you leave there or when you finish that, you go, I think 99 times out of 100 or 9 times out of 10, whatever it is you leave going, I'm happy that I went.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's important to sometimes push yourself out of your comfort zone there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads into this idea of sometimes how controlling like negative thoughts and feelings can feel for us.
Yeah.
And this idea of what we kind of call like the cognitive triangle, which is if you imagine a triangle that has 3 points.
Yep.
So you have thoughts, feelings, and behavior. And if you imagine like kind of bi-directional arrows, they're all kind of feeding into each other. And this idea of sometimes when we have like negative thoughts or feelings, or we're feeling really uncomfortable, it has the ability to influence our behavior in a way that's maybe not helpful, right? And actually might make things worse. So an example might be, you know, if I'm thinking I'm a bad person, right? So that's the thought I'm having. That then translates into, you know, uncomfortable feelings for me, right? Like I might feel shame, judgment, criticism, embarrassment, you know, maybe I feel depressed, right? All of those are highly uncomfortable feelings. So now I've got uncomfortable thought, uncomfortable feeling, and I kind of get that funneling into an influence on my behavior. And so my behavior might look like, instead of going out with friends, right, I'm going to avoid that. I'm going to stay in. I'm going to continue to isolate, right, and kind of keep to myself. And then I'm just going to kind of go around this perpetual cycle, right, because then I'm just amplifying those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings I'm already having. And so the challenge here is to recognize you don't have control over the thoughts and feelings, but you do have control over the behavior. I would say this is one of the hardest lessons for people to learn in therapy. Is you actually can't control thoughts and feelings. You can try really hard, but it probably won't work. But you can control the behavioral piece, right? You can make a choice of what's going to be helpful for me versus what's going to continue to kind of feed into this cycle of discomfort.
Discomfort, yeah.
So yeah, we kind of want to look at just trying to create some space between us and that negative thought. And there's lots of ways you can do that. Gratitude work is one. Another way is just acknowledging, right? And I said this earlier when I was talking about anxiety, that, you know, your thoughts are not facts. They're just thoughts. They're stories your brain is telling you because you're experiencing a discomfort of some type. And so as soon as we kind of acknowledge that, right, and say, you know, I'm not a bad person. I'm just having the thought I'm a bad person. The feelings are still going to be there, but it's going to be a little less intense. It's going to soften a little bit. And then the influence of my thought and feeling isn't going to so strongly influence my behavior. So really what we're looking at is you're not necessarily looking at changing the content of your thought and feeling. You're just looking at changing the function of your thought and feeling on your behavior.
Like, don't give it as much like power.
Yeah.
Like, don't let it control you, and don't give it as much power, and give yourself grace to realize that and notice.
Yes, absolutely. And that's very much
because there's patterns that probably form with your thoughts that if you have that self-awareness, and again, back to if you're talking to a professional person, they can help you identify those and go, it seems like when you're in these situations, you tend to do this, and help you recognize them, and so that you can go, I'm not a bad person, but I'm thinking that right now, but I'm going to go try to do something nice and see how somebody reacts, so I feel like a better person or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that snowball like uphill.
Yes, a positive snowball, right? And 9 times out of 10, when we do put ourselves in this situation, like it's not as bad as we thought, and we actually leave it feeling better than we did before, right? So it's just, again, about that healthy exposure to things that aren't, you know, feeding into negative thoughts and feelings.
Continuing with that theme that we taught, our last topic of comparison to others, and maybe not comparison to others in a negative way, but or making yourself feel negative, but just looking at others, or individually thinking like, oh, I have everything together and everything's going well. Why do I feel this way, right? Or like, why are these bad things happening, or why do I feel this way? I should be happy in this thing. And I think that it's normal to feel sad and depressed as a human being at different times. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really common experience a lot of people have, and maybe isn't talked about as much. But yeah, like you can have like, again, like a really great, what looks to be a really great life from the outside, right? Like other people might perceive, what do you have to be sad or depressed about, right? But it doesn't matter like what's in front of you. Feelings like depression, anxiety, sadness, grief, like don't care about like those material things. It's still an emotional experience you're going to have regardless of how much money you have, where you live, what car you drive. And so sometimes it can just be helpful to like accept that those feelings are showing up. It's uncomfortable, but when you just give them a bit of space, when you label them, when you try to sit with them, they soften a little bit, and they're not going to, again, entirely like leave you, but they're not going to feel so overpowering and all consuming. And that's kind of the place that we're trying to shift to.
So what would you say to somebody that's stuck in that cognitive triangle?
Yeah, so someone who's like feeling very stuck in the thoughts and the feelings, and engaging in maybe not helpful behavior, we might suggest something like behavioral activation, which is kind of this idea of creating like small positive forward momentum through setting kind of different goals and achievements for yourself. So an easy way to think about this is, nobody climbs Mount Everest in a day, right? We divide it up into separate little summits that are manageable. There's rest and recovery in between. And so we can kind of apply that same analogy to getting ourselves kind of up and moving, right? And working towards a larger goal. We want to make baby steps, start small. You don't want to set like this big lofty goal for yourself, because in doing that you kind of make the fear of failure a little bit bigger. And this is also sometimes where we can experience some procrastination, right? Because the minute you start that big lofty goal, the risk or the fear of failure becomes much greater. And so we kind of just
self-sabotage.
Yeah, you kind of get in your own way a little bit, and you kind of end up crawling back inside of that, hibernation zone. So we want to start small, right? And so break it down into manageable steps. Be really specific, right? If it's, I want to get outside more. Okay, well, like, let's make that more specific. 3 times a week, I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk. It doesn't matter what day.
Not, hey, I'm going to run a marathon.
Yeah, no, you don't dive in head first.
Yes,
but moderate kind of baby steps. And the idea behind this as well is every time you accomplish a small goal, you're also going to experience a sense of pleasure, a sense of achievement. You're going to maybe feel proud of yourself, and you're going to get this kind of dopamine hit that's, wow, that felt good. Like, maybe I can keep building on this positive forward momentum and keep myself going. And eventually you start doing more small goals, then like medium-sized goals, then bigger goals, and
you build your confidence up, and you feel good about yourself as opposed to going down the other way.
It's us kind of taking advantage of like this basic human function of like positive reinforcement, right? It works. It's the brain responds well to it. So take advantage of that, right? And like set yourself up for success rather than kind of getting in your way before you even start the goal. It's okay.
And the consistency.
Yes.
Like, but it's small, but important to maintain the consistency there.
Yeah. Like a consistent intentional effort is where you're going to see like the best and the most success with like goal setting, and also trying to change a behavior that you're not liking.
Okay. Nice. All right, so I'm going to throw you a curveball here to end it.
Oh, God. I don't like curveballs.
I can tell you're an extremely prepared person.
Yeah, I'm very type A.
Absolutely nailed this. I'm very happy, and I'm excited to see it and listen to it.
Me too.
We were to recap this, and you were to say, your 3 biggest tips. And again, what I would say here is I would caveat this, or I would preface this by saying, if you asked me my 3 biggest tips, I would give you an answer like, well, everybody's unique.
Right.
And so I think I would preface it by saying, we understand that every situation is unique, but overall, what are your 3 top tips for finding the joy, dealing with anxiety? And as a therapist, as a psychotherapist, what are your 3 top general tips for living a happy life, fulfilled life?
Yeah. Well, that's a big question.
I knew I was going to throw you a curveball.
Yeah. I would say reminding yourself that everyone struggles, everyone has anxiety, everyone has tough days. You are not alone in that. And lean into it, like lean into the struggle. That's where you're going to find connection and support, whether that's through therapy or also through like your personal support system, right? Friends, family, people around you. There's something we call like community care, and it's really important to lean into that, right? You don't have to do this all on your own. So I would say that's a really important thing for people to remember. get off of social media. Honestly, like it's great to have, but
like the podcast first. But,
listen to the podcast, but then get off social media.
Yes,
but yeah, stop comparing yourself to everyone else. I promise you, everyone else is not doing better than you, even if that's the story that your brain is telling you. It's just not true. And so make sure you call yourself out on that with compassion, catch yourself with it. And if you can't, if you feel like you can't get off social media, then curate your page so that you're seeing things that make you feel good, not constantly and chronically being exposed to things that make you feel crappy or like make you judge yourself or shame yourself. Look for the joy on social media as well. You get a choice over what you expose yourself to.
Stick to the funny dog videos.
Yeah. Yes, the funny dog videos, anything that makes you laugh. But yeah, we have power to control what we expose ourselves to, and so use that to your advantage. And my last one, I would say embrace the mess. Like, truly, I think everyone nowadays gets so caught up in, as you said, keeping up with the Joneses and like being perfect at everything and never failing. Failing and experiencing challenges is also how you learn. And the reality is, like, the mess is where sometimes like the best things happen and the best lessons happen. That's where you build resilience and distress tolerance and all these skills that can be so helpful for other parts of our life. And yeah, sometimes mess can be fun, especially for maybe young people here, right? Like in your 20s and, maybe really early 30s. Your life is your life, so make the choices you want to make. Like, you don't have to be, getting engaged, getting married, having babies. Like, have fun, make the mistakes, learn from it, within reason, of course. But yeah, have fun and embrace the mess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very well said. Very
Thank
well
you.
said.
Yeah.
So now, what are you watching, listening to?
God.
Other than the podcast.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, that's Andrew. I know Andrew,
Yeah.
my man, is doing that. But obviously you had a big 2025, so congratulations on that.
You.
And
Yes.
And hopefully continued upwards and onwards there. So so that's great. But just a more light segment there on what
things I'm consuming.
things that you're consuming, the positive things.
I love to read. I love like novels, like fictional stories about like messy family dynamics. I love the drama,
Okay, yeah, all right.
And on the note of drama, my guilty pleasure is like reality TV shows. Okay. Love like Real Housewives of any city, like sign me up.
Okay, all right.
I love that. What am I listening to? I listen to a bit of everything. I'm a Taylor Swift fan, so she's on repeat.
Swiftie,
yes.
I have 3 Swifties in my house. And so someone's got to be not a Swiftie, so I fill that role.
You just fill that title.
That role,
Andrew sometimes fills that role. But she brings me joy, so I like listening to her. I'm not really sure what else to share about myself. I did get engaged this year.
Congratulations.
In October, and we bought a house.
Shout
as
out Andrew, nice job. Yeah.
Yes, he did a good job. So 2025 was a big year for us. 2026, I'm not sure how we can top it, but we're planning a wedding and just, I think, enjoying having our house and building a life. So,
That's awesome. Yes. And congratulations for that. And
Thank you.
From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for coming on. I think this is going to be great.
Yeah.
And I hope it's not the last time we do this, because I know that you're passionate, extremely intelligent, and have a lot of knowledge and experience with these types of things. And I think it's nice to hear that it's not just you or you or you or you or anybody in particular, that a lot of people feel these ways, and getting some tips to get into that positive snowball, I think, is extremely important.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was very fun.
Reach out to Hilary here, and here, and at Calming Tree there.
Yes.
And certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We'll put your link in there, and look forward to chatting again.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome.